Hello, YouTube. The beginning of the 20th century was marked by a number of strange incidents on the territory of the Russian Empire, which the locals attributed to the intervention of otherworldly forces. Among them, a special place is occupied by stories about encounters with werewolves, mythical creatures endowed with the ability to transform from a human into a beast and back again. Such accounts became regular at that time, which allows us to consider them as an important element of the cultural heritage of Russia at the turn of the century. Especially many cases were recorded in Tambov province, which was then located on the periphery of the central regions of the country. These events were reflected not only in the oral tradition, but also documented in local archives and printed publications of that time in the empire. Local peasants imagined a werewolf in the form of an ordinary person who, under certain circumstances, could change his appearance and turn into an animal. Most often it was about the wolf, although there were mentions of other animal forms. Werewolves possessed amazing physical abilities such as incredible strength, movement, speed, and the ability to disappear without a trace. People consider these creatures dangerous to society, attributing to them a tendency to attack villagers and cause damage to the property. Such ideas arose most often in remote villages, far from large cities, where superstitions played a significant role in people's lives. The living conditions were difficult. The population lacked knowledge and access to information was limited. As a result, any incomprehensible event could receive a mystical explanation. Often the reason for the emergence of legends about werewolves were natural phenomena, diseases, or just accidents to which people attached a special meaning. The most famous case was the story that happened in the summer of 1913 in the village of Krivusha, today's Pavlodar, Uvarov district. According to the official documents of the local administration, a villager observed a creature of unusual appearance at night, which quickly disappeared after being discovered by the human. The report noted that the villager was under the influence of the alcohol, but later other residents confirmed the disappearance of livestock due to an unknown cause. Another case was recorded in the autumn of the same year near the village of Perkino. A local teacher claimed to have seen a man suddenly transform into a large wolf. The woman reported the event to the authorities, after which an investigation was conducted, the results of which remained unknown. In the village of Milguni, in the Mordovian region, people were afraid to go out at night for almost 2 weeks in the late fall or autumn of 1942. The men who remained in the village were on duty all night, guarding cattle and people. The reason was a repeated attack by an unknown animal. The worst tragedy happened at the very beginning of the events. On the first night, on the outskirts of the village, a 4-year-old girl was dragged out of her house by a huge animal. They searched for her for several days, but in vain. 2 weeks later, the military came and cleared the local forests, and as a result, up to 50 large wolves were destroyed. But most importantly, in a remote abandoned village, they found a dugout where an unknown man lived as a hermit. The man was tall and very physically strong. He was arrested and taken to Tambov. No one else heard from him, and the terrible attacks on people and animals stopped. Already in 1956, young people, in the number of about 7 to 10 people, were returning from parties from the village of Likharevo to the neighboring village of Grigorievka, Zhurdevsky district. The path went through a remote steppe meaning like plains, savanna, for about 3 kilometers. Halfway there, the boys heard a wolf howling from the direction of the tract. It was very powerful and loud. It felt like this creature was huge and strong. So the guys sat down. There was an incomplete moon in the sky, but even in this light, they could see the large shape of an unknown creature 200 to 300 meters away from them. However, they were not afraid, but on the contrary began to shout loudly, swear obscenities, and move towards the werewolf, along the way grabbing sticks, stones, and anything that came to hand in the dark. The creature stood motionless for a while, then slowly began to move backwards, as if it was preparing to attack. But at the last moment, the monster jumped aside and quickly disappeared into the darkness. Another case occurred in the Tokarevsky district of the Tambov region in the 1960 to 1961. A shepherd was hired to guard the sheep for the whole summer. A summer camp was set up in the fields where the animals were kept in a pen at night. After midnight, the watchman heard the restless behavior of sheep in the farthest corner of the camp. Picking up a large wooden staff, he surreptitiously moved to check on the situation. Coming closer, in the twilight of the night, he could see a shaggy humanoid creature. It was sitting on all fours and gnawing on the carcass, eating, of a bullied animal. The shepherd hit the monster on the head with his staff with all his might. The monster howled and collapsed to the ground. At the same time, jumped up, forcefully pushed the man away, and ran off. The next day, the man with a head injury, who allegedly fell down the stairs, was sent to the hospital in a neighboring village. There have been long, strange rumors and accusations about this resident, that he was engaged in devilry. Nevertheless, it should be borne in mind that such stories could be a consequence of the psychological state of some individuals. For example, some researchers suggest that behind the stories about werewolves, there were mental disorders in specific individuals who sincerely believed in their connection with the world of spirits and evil spirits. However, it is also it's impossible to completely exclude the cultural factor. After all, the folk culture of that time was filled with a variety of beliefs and traditions passed down from generation to generation. Fairy tales, songs, and customs reinforced the belief in the existence of unexplained phenomena, thereby creating fertile ground for the spread of stories about werewolves. So the analysis of the stories about werewolves gives us the opportunity to penetrate deeper into the world of ideas of the Russian peasantry of the early 20th century and later, and before too. And we'll speak about it. This phenomenon helps to understand the peculiarities of the consciousness of ordinary people who lived in conditions of limited access to knowledge and science, who were exposed to traditional folk thinking and beliefs. But decades passed, and stories like the one I'm about to tell you also happened. This incident occurred in the late 1980s in a missile unit location near Siberian city of Irkutsk. In the middle of the night, the senior lieutenant was called to the scene. A soldier from his platoon, Private Metrov, was standing guard. Walking around the territory entrusted to him, he noticed a huge figure in the light of a lantern behind a wire fence. Outwardly, the intruder resembled a strange hybrid of a human and a wolf, only about 2 meters tall. His body was covered with long gray fur, his eyes burned with an unkind fire, and his long muzzle curled into a fanged snarl. When the monster made an attempt to climb over the fence, frightened but not confused, the guard began firing from the machine gun that he had. To his horror, the soldier realized that the bullets did not cause any harm to the beast. As if bouncing off the gray hide. However, after the uproar, the monster turned and disappeared into the forest. Colleagues found Petrov in a state close to hysteria. The senior lieutenant who arrived at the scene could hardly make out his incoherent speech, but the picture of the incident was supplemented by strange finds at the place where, according to the private, the beast appeared. There was really no blood found there, but there were traces of large animal paws, and it looked like the beast was walking on two legs. In addition, much to the embarrassment of the head of the guard unit, there was also a tuft of gray-black wool hanging on the fence wire. At that time, of course, the case was hushed up, but this does not negate the fact that a creature appeared in the Taiga garrison, which, according to the description, fully corresponded to the werewolf. Moreover, meetings with similar or other creatures that can be attributed to the same category continued. Many years later, after the incident, a resident of Ivanov told about a similar encounter. It was in the Kostroma region. At that time, Irina Gavarkova was still a schoolgirl and was spending her holidays with her grandmother in the village. See, in that village, there was an old woman named Taisia, and studied very sturdy for her advanced age. The exact number of years, nobody knew how old she was. She cheerfully drove her goats to pasture and back, and did housework in a way that not everyone in the village could do. Well, it was Irina who encountered her in the meadow. The girl was riding a bicycle, but on the wet grass she couldn't slow down in time and almost crashed into Taisia. Then the old lady began to behave quite strangely. After making a circle around the girl, she grinned strangely. Her face seemed to be covered with gray fur, stretched out, and fangs appeared between her lips. It lasted only a short time, but Irina managed to get scared after a moment. The face was the same. The old lady looked at Irina and told her to forget everything as soon as possible. No one would believe her anyway. Indeed, Irina's grandmother attributed the whole story to girl's rich imagination, although evil tongues claimed that they saw Taisia go to the river in the evening, return in the guise of a black boar, and live for more than 100 years. In short, they considered her a witch capable of changing her appearance. Of course, how could a 100-year-old grandmother keep up with her goats? But it's another matter if she transforms into a wolf or a dog. These images are most typical of both werewolves and witches. However, the latter can take on other forms, such as horses. In Slavic beliefs, folklore often mentions werewolves, people or mythological creatures, actual mythological characters, who can change shape and transform into animals, birds, insects, and even objects. They were popularly called volkolaki, перевертыши, or wolfmen and shifters. It was believed that sorcerers and knowledgeable people, healers, could become werewolves. They changed their appearance at will to escape from being chased or to break into someone else's house and steal something. During their lifetime, those who did not have time to pass on their secrets to others, they became dogs. A werewolf could turn into anyone and anything, but most often in the stories of their ancestors, they took the form of an animal. Sorcerers usually prowl like wolves at night, that is, in the darkness caused by black clouds, but during the day they again perceive human forms. They are in close contact with the what in Russian is called unclean spirits, and their very transformation into wolves is accomplished with the help of the devil, according to the Russian writer of the 19th century, Alexander Afanasyev. The poetic views of the Slavs on nature, that book, believed that ordinary people in most cases became werewolves against their will, for example, if they were corrupted. Vladimir Dal described how women were allegedly found in the skins of slain wolves and bears. There are stories about sorcerers who turned the newlyweds and their guests were turned into wolves simply because he wasn't invited to the wedding or was offended during the feast. To protect themselves from this, a belt with many knots was worn at the celebration. It was believed that a sorcerer could not harm until he untied each of them. Werewolves could supposedly become birds, a magpie, a crow, and an owl. In some areas, there were beliefs that a sorcerer turned the bride into a cuckoo bird at the wedding. Historians have noted that the old judicial acts of the empire preserved the confessions of women that at times they turned into magpies. Most likely, such testimony was given after threats. There are also references in the legends to real historical figures who supposedly turned into animals and of their own free will. Some believed that Anna Glinskaya, Ivan the Terrible's grandmother, had turned into a bird. She was accused of witchcraft and was considered the culprit of the Great Fire that took place in Moscow in the year 1547. It was mentioned that Glinskaya turned into a magpie with the help of sorcery, and that she flew over the city and doused it with blood. It was said that Marina Mnishek, the wives of the false Dmitry I, he called himself the Emperor of Russia for a while. You can see my other videos about it. Fascinating. Anyway, the legend is that she became a bird. That's how she escaped persecution. Scientist Vasily Tatishev, in his The History of Russia from the Most Ancient Times, mentioned that he had heard from one nobleman how he turned into a bear, and they believed him. Sometimes reports about werewolves look very plausible and are almost documentary in nature. For example, the story about the werewolf Mikhail, especially since the geologists were witnesses. About 50 years ago, Vladislav Vernik, a young geologist who graduated from the Geological and Geographical Faculty of Irkutsk University, was interning in the village of Dushkachan in the Severo-Baikalsky district. See, not too far away from the Lake Baikal, as usual. The exploration party explored the northern region in order to search for mineral deposits in connection with the future construction of the BAM road. And by the way, I have videos about strange phenomena that happened during this historical construction and things observed there. Anyway, the base party of the geological group stopped in Dushkachan. The geologists lived compactly on one street of the village. Mikhail Bereisha, the expedition's radio operator, he lived in the village with his wife, who was also a geologist. The radio operator had a passion for hunting, and here for centuries the taiga stretched for hundreds of kilometers. Where in his spare time he went hunting with a group of comrades, or sometimes even alone, he almost always returned with rich loot. Or one day, Mikhail went to the taiga and did not return for a long time. He did return a week later. The villagers noticed the wound on Mikhail's forehead. In addition, his character changed. He became short-tempered, easily enraged. Having once again gone into the taiga, Mikhail never returned. A multi-day search led to nothing, and early snowfall, and it was early August, made further searches difficult. So they decided to postpone it until next summer in order to find the remains of the missing men. Another summer has arrived. The search began again. and experienced Avank hunters with dogs were brought in. But there were no footprints. Only his wife did not believe in his death and claimed that he was alive. In the middle of summer, strange rumors began to spread in the village that a lone big bear had been seen wandering near the village, not being afraid of people. And people noticed that there was a scar in the form of white stripe on the forehead of the bear. His behavior was unusual. He did not let anyone near him. He possessed unusual cunning for a beast. More than once, brave hunters tried to catch up with the bear, but it suddenly disappeared before their eyes. And then, like lightning, another piece of news swept through the village. This is Mikhail, wrapped in a bear, wandering near the village, not afraid of people. According to residents, Mikhail, having turned into a man, visited his wife's house on a full moon. Mikhail's wife did not deny these rumors, but she didn't confirm them either. One day, in late autumn, hunters wounded a large bear in the taiga. A trail of fresh blood led them to an empty lair, and then they found a dead large bear among the mighty 100-year-old pines. The beast was lying on the newly fallen snow, staring with frozen eyes at the sky. The hunters determined that the beast had died from a wound inflicted on it recently by hunters. But most importantly, everyone noticed the characteristic scar on the forehead of the dead bear in the form of a light stripe, the same as that of the werewolf Mikhail. The Russian word is oborotin, and it encompasses more than just wolves. But I'm using the English term werewolf, so you will understand. Anyway, everyone felt scared. This feeling intensified when the hunters found a well-camouflaged protective colored awning nearby. It was stretched directly over the branches of the trees. 40 spent shell casings were found inside the tent. Similar reports about werewolf, bears, and wolves are often similar in plot. A common detail is mentioned: unusual behavior preceding reincarnation. Mikhail experienced anxiety, tension, and gratuitous aggression. According to popular observations, these are the signs of a werewolf. In the village where the Ulan-Ude resident Vladimir Shagdarovich lived as a child, there was a lot of talk about local werewolves, sorcerers, and witches, and an old woman who could cast spells lived next to their family. According to rumors, she turned into a pig on a full moon and lay in wait for a late traveler. Once during such an encounter, the werewolf pig got its paw hurt. The next morning, the villagers saw the old witch with a bandaged arm near the paramedic station. They like to tell about the same case in the Yarovninsky district, only there during the Soviet period. Atheistically educated young people were not afraid of an unusual pig, but they beat it badly. The next day, the unsociable grandmother could not get out of bed, and there were numerous signs of beatings on her face and body. In the popular environment, such cases were interpreted from a mystical point of view. There is a wealth of folklore material that describes the signs of a werewolf, ways to protect against it, and techniques for returning to human form. How do they become werewolves? People consider werewolf to be a gift possessed by people with supernatural abilities, warlocks and witches. To become, for example, a wolf, a sorcerer must throw himself over a knife stuck in the ground. In order to become human again, the werewolf shifts in the opposite direction. Turning into a werewolf is often associated with a full moon but it is an optional condition. A simple man could become a wolf if a sorcerer threw an animal skin, an enchanted belt, or a ribbon over him. It was believed that if you steal an object to which a sorcerer turns around, then the werewolf will not be able to take on human form. Werewolves were also children abducted by evil spirits or at the word of the mother because of the curse of the mother in anger. Moreover, such wolves should not eat raw meat, otherwise they could remain wolves forever. A werewolf is recognized by its behavior, unusual cunning, which are lacking in an ordinary animal and which are unique to humans. There's a well-known sign among the people. When a werewolf comes to drink at the water, it reflects not the wolf, but the human image. The water does. And you can recognize a werewolf by the fact that the knees of the hind legs are turned forward like a human and not backward like an animal. I guess there is a protection from a werewolf by a snake axe. An axe used to kill a snake. That would protect a werewolf in the old legends. It was also possible to protect oneself by hitting the werewolf sorcerer, injuring him. What does science say? Doctors are aware of cases of pseudo-turnover, so to say, when the transformation into a beast occurs only in a person's mind. His physical body does not change. These are imaginary werewolves or lycanthropes. Lycanthropy is an obsessive mental condition in which a person considers himself or herself a werewolf. There is documentary evidence of French, German, and Scottish peasants who suffered from lycanthropy in the past centuries. Such imaginary werewolves ran on all fours, killed their own cows. From the depths of time, actually, the magical technique of turning into a human animal has been known to many people, ethnicities, since ancient times. In Slavic legends, the werewolf was characterized as a powerful being of divine origin. With the adoption of Christianity, werewolves began to be considered creeping nocturnal monsters that harm humans. The bear was considered a sacred animal, an object of worship in the pagan traditions of the ancient Slavs and Germans. The features of bearish movements are used in creating the style of pagan Slavic wrestling. The bear is also a sacred totemic animal among the people of Siberia, different people, different ethnicities. According to the ideas of the Buryats, Sayots, and Evenks, natural phenomena and animals were spiritualized. The genus can go back to any totemic animal, for example, a swan, a bear, or a wolf. Ritual dances before hunting were performed to establish a connection with their totem, the patron animal. Performing in the guise of an animal, the participants of the dances sought to acquire the qualities necessary for hunting. For example, the strength and endurance of a wolf. The behavior of the selected animal was simulated. The dancers supported the characteristic poses and rhythms of the forest predators by singing ritual songs. Physical werewolves. Some modern researchers believe that there are not only psychic werewolves, but also real ones that actually transform into the physical body of the beast. These are werewolves who possess the technique of turning into an animal. The transformation can occur involuntarily, unexpectedly for the werewolf himself or herself. The secret knowledge of werewolf worship is possessed by the servants of the leopard cult in the impenetrable jungles of South America and Africa, Kenya, Liberia. Being in animal form, a werewolf is able to preserve human characteristics, has a memory, and memories of his human life often lead him to his home. Stories about werewolves indicate that such a combined creature often does not return either to humans or to human form. But if there is a rational grain in such legends, It means that some unknown forces manifest themselves in the phenomenon of werewolves. Is it possible that an unknown force, unknown to science, causes changes in tissues that transform into another form? In some ways, this idea resembles the nanoassembly process in the construction of the same molecules of different objects. In the nano world, they operate with the smallest fractions of a millimeter. Nanotechnology is a promising field of science and technology which humans are just approaching. But they have another unexpected effect discovered in the Novosibirsk branch of the Russian Academy of Sciences. Bandages soaked in nano solution, it turns out, have increased bactericidal activity. The nano solution kills pathogenic microbes and can replace antibiotics, according to the Russian media. But perhaps nanoparticles are also not harmless, since due to their size, they are able to penetrate far into the body. The walls of blood vessels are permeable to them. In the future, I want to tell you more stories based on the writings of the well-known Russian writer who passed away not long ago. His conversations many years ago, decades ago, with the still at that time alive members of the Soviet secret police, of the precursors to the KGB and KVD, and even before, and how they encountered the supernatural in their work, investigative work, and in the operations against enemies in the forest of the Siberia, taiga, and so forth. Fascinating stuff. And also during World War II, and I already have some in my channel. You can find a lot of interesting materials about paranormal Russia and Ukraine and Belarus, and also going into China, Mongolia, and so forth in my channel. I want to thank you for your attention to my work. Please like my videos. Please let YouTube know that people watch me. Please subscribe to my channel. And if you can help my research, you'll find links on how to do it in the description to this video. Stay tuned for more videos, please.